Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Mundell. I'm an architect. I've been an architect for since 2003 licensed, so about 20 years, amazingly. I started when I was young. And then I've been involved with sustainability since 2007. Or 2006, I got my lead AP and worked on a variety of sustainability projects in addition to as architecture as well. And so I've been kind of giving sustainability presentations to various universities and colleges around Texas over the years. And so I was happy to do this one as well. I have a presentation I typically give that just kind of talks at a big picture about a lot of different things. But I'm happy to stop and take questions either during the presentation or at the end. Or again, if you think of something later on, you want to email me back, you're welcome to do that as well. So again, it's a high level. I try not to get into the weeds about everything. There's so much to talk about when it comes to sustainability. But I just try to give a brief overview so you kind of see the big picture as you learn about it, as you work on projects, as you get involved in the industry. Again, these are some of the things I'm seeing. There's, different opinions and lots of stuff that goes on, but here's what I see over the years. I used to only talk about sustainability. In the past couple of years, I changed it to sustainability and well-being, because we understand that they're similar but yet different. And so I'll talk about that in the presentation today as well. So again, I talk fast, just stop me or tell me to slow down, or if I need to clarify something. Again, I think some of you may have some knowledge of this, and some of this may be completely new to you, and that's fine. Again, that's why I'm trying to do this, is to educate you. So okay, I'll jump into it. Let's see. So I'll talk a little bit about sustainability and well-being. I'm going to chime into, again, the design, the architectural design or the interior design of things, the constructions and operations. I'm going to touch a little bit about building codes and green codes versus rating systems like LEED and well-being and well. And then, again, leave some time for Q&A. So what I see as a definition of sustainability, there's a lot of different ones. If you research it, there's a lot of different options out there, but I see it as the impact on our environment in the sense of our natural environment, our natural resources, energy, water, air, all those kind of things that affect our planet, and how that is, again, we're trying to do better by not destroying our planet and making it a livable space to continue to stay. The well-being of it, though, is potentially more about us, right? How are we doing in this environment? Are we healthy? Are we struggling with climate change and natural disasters and air quality and all those kind of things? So, like I said, they're really one and the same, but they're also a little bit different in the sense of one's more the planet and one's more the people. And you can't have one without the other, right? I guess you could have a planet without people, but that wouldn't be any fun. But we definitely can't have people without a planet. So I jokingly say the color green is just a color. Everybody says everything is green, right? If you think about, there's so much green washing going on where, there's green products and green strategies and green things and green that, and that's fine. That's great. But I think more words like sustainability and resilience and well-being are better terms than just green. So I made a joke here. And then the key thing when I was talking about green codes versus rating systems, when you think about building codes or accessibility or some of those other things, you have to do those. Green rating systems like LEED and WELL sometimes are not always mandatory. They're more recommendation, or more the client wants to be more sustainable than the code, and so they're going to do more. So just again, in the architectural and construction industry, just understand there is a little bit difference between what's a code versus what's not particularly a code. Any questions on those? Okay. Is everybody familiar with LEED? Have you talked about a little bit about LEED, the rating systems? So again, I'll chime into a little bit later on, but LEED is a building rating system that came up with this idea of certain levels of certification. You do certain strategies, you get certain points, and then you get a certain level of certification. So this chart is the idea about over the years, LEED is trying to raise the bar, right? So again, hopefully you can see my cursor, but the bottom line is over the time, right? From back in the day to where we are today and in the future. And then the vertical line is our impact to our environment. right? Right now, we're still causing harm to our environment. And there's this whole idea about net zero, right? Or zero impact, a net zero building or net zero waste or net zero energy. Those are things where we're trying to reduce our harm to our environments. And even one step farther is a positive impact, where again, I'll give you an example. Let's say we design a building and we put solar panels on the roof, and the solar panels offset 50% of the energy use. That is reducing our energy use, but it's still a negative because there's still 50% that's being used. If we put enough solar panels on the roof and we're at 0% or net zero, then again, we're not causing any harm. If we put more solar panels than what we need and our neighbors are using our energy, then that's positive. We're creating more energy than what we could use for the building, and we're basically helping the community. So that's what I mean about net zero versus negative and positive. And over the years, you had these traditional building codes were just like, this is what you have to meet for the basic code, right? It's a building, it's so many stories tall, it's got doors and windows and all that. Then again, a couple of years ago, we had this idea of green building codes, right? Looking at energy, water, waste, environmental quality, all that. And so what LEED and other programs are trying to do is to raise the bar of all of this towards a net zero or positive impact. So that's what this graph is trying to basically show. Does that make sense to everybody? I know it's a little confusing, but just the idea is we're trying to do less harm to the environment, is what I'm saying. So, this is a project, I threw in a couple of pictures from Parkhill. This is a project called Buddy Holly Performing Arts Center. It's up in Lubbock. It just got finished a year or two ago. It's kind of fun. Again, cool pictures as an architect, just throwing them in there. But if you ever get a chance you're in Lubbock, go check it out. It's pretty neat. Okay, so a couple different things to talk about. Again, as architects and designers, there's really kind of two ways to tackle a project. One is called passive design, the other one's called active. You might have already heard this before, but the idea is passive is about the architecture and active is about the systems in the building. When we talk about renewable energy or renewables, we're looking at this idea of basically non-fossil fuel sources of energy. So mostly solar and wind are the two big ones. There's also potentially geothermal and some other ones as well. When it comes to net zero, it doesn't always just mean net zero energy. You can have net zero water, where you're basically reusing water on your site and you're not taking any water from the local city. And also net zero waste. Maybe again, you're recycling or composting everything and you're not taking stuff to the landfill. So there's various definitions for net zero. The other thing that's really important too when it comes to sustainability and well-being is the idea about biophilia and biomimicry. So again, we all want to be connected to nature. We either want to be outside or we want to be inside looking outside, or we want to have our green plants like behind you, some type of nature, right? That's in our context. And so we also can design around the connection with nature. So again, it's an important piece of sustainability as well. So again, with the passive design, the key things as architects and designers and even engineers, we're looking at the building orientation, right? Which way faces north, which way faces east and west. Again, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and that's usually your strongest solar heat gain is coming from those sides. What size and shape are you building? Is it a flat square? Is it a tall tower? Is it a U-shaped building? All those kind of come into play with the orientation and this heat and sunlight and all that. And then obviously our envelope, our building envelope, meaning again, is it brick? Is it metal panel? Is it stone? Is it all glass? All those things come into play. Down here in Texas, obviously the biggest concern is solar, right? The summertime, it gets too hot. We want to keep the building cool. The wintertime, we want to keep the building warm. But it's a lot different than you're up like in, let's say, Alaska or Minnesota or Maine, where it's very cold up there. Again, you're going to use a different envelope maybe than you'd use down here in Texas. So all that's important to design your project is looking about your building, your shape, your orientation, and what's made of. After that, then you again, working with your engineering team, you need to look at the mechanical system, the HVAC, heating and cooling. There's various systems out there. Some are more efficient than others. Again, chillers, versus rooftop units. versus geothermal. All those things have a play in your building for keeping it heated and cool. Lighting is the biggest one because lighting produces heat coming off the lights, as well as the lights using power to run the lights. So again, when you're looking at ways to save energy, look at ways to basically turn off the lights with occupancy sensors or daylight harvesting. All those will save you energy and costs. And then there's controls. Again, controls for the mechanical units, so like thermostats and all that can shut down at nighttime. Everybody leaves an office building. Do we need the AC running? Do we need the lights on all day at night? We don't. Usually the custodial team comes in, turn the lights all on when they clean at night, and they leave them all on all night, right? So again, can we use occupancy sensors or something like that to turn off after they're done? All that affects your energy use and your sustainability of your project. Make sense? Okay. Renewables. So again, here in Texas, one of the biggest ones that we know about is wind. A lot of the wind turbines that you see in West Texas or what everybody's familiar with, you drive out there and you just see nothing but wind farms. I had a chance about 10 years or so ago to actually work on 3 wind turbines at the University of North Texas up here in Dallas-Fort Worth area. The university got a grant from SECO for $2 million to install 3 wind turbines. We had to do a feasibility study to make sure that it worked. There was no issues with sound and bird and aviation and all that. And again, I can share with you another day about all that, but it was awesome to be involved in that and learn all about the wind. So these wind turbines were called community scale. They weren't as big as the ones in West Texas. So they were a little bit more acceptable to be in a more urban environment. So again, that's a big one. The other one is solar. A lot of people understand solar panels on the buildings or on shade devices. Again, that's still, we get a lot of sun in Texas, so that's still a good option as well. When it comes to net zero, there is 2 terminologies, site versus source energy. It's basically saying that what's the energy on the site of your space, like here on the campus, or the source energy is where it's coming from the municipality. Again, there's a power plant, 100 miles away. That's the source energy coming. A lot of cities and governments are using more sustainable energy with wind and solar. So sometimes, again, that sustainability is coming to your project, even if you don't have it on your site. So there's a little bit of clarification for there. Again, the biophilia idea. This is I used to work at Gensler for a couple of years, and this is one of those moss walls that's kind of live, and again, you see the table kind of looks like a wood piece from a tree. It just, again, it's inside of a room, but it makes you feel like you're kind of connected to nature. So these are what I mean when I say biophilia. It's just kind of this idea of bringing it indoors. The problem is, again, with COVID, a lot of us couldn't be indoors, and so we had to go outside. And then nowadays we have this heat, wave that had this summer, so everybody was back indoors. So it's a struggle of which one's safer these days, being indoors with COVID or being outdoors with heat. So I'll let you all decide which one was safer for you, but it's definitely not easy either way. Okay, so on the well-being side, there's 4 things that I typically see. One is the idea of nourishment when it comes to food, fitness and exercise, the comfort level, and then materials and products. With nourishment, again, I think most of you'll see nowadays that they're looking more and more at just healthier options. In the old days, you go to a vending machine, there was only sodas. Now there's fruit juices or there's milk. There's at least some different options. Not saying that one's better than the other for sure, but I think they're trying to look at opportunities for options for everybody. It seems like everybody's got a food allergy these days, whether it's gluten, dairy, peanut, fish, whatever it is. There's always something that we're all being careful about. And that's great. So again, helping with labeling of the food ingredients or giving you different options helps, so that if you're going to a cafeteria or a restaurant or a vending machine, you have some options for everybody. It's great. And then the last one is access to free water. I know it sounds crazy, but again, it's just, there's so many places you get to spend $5 for a water bottle. You're like, why? So I think it's great when universities and colleges and other groups have those filling stations, at the water fountains nowadays. Everybody rather fill their cup and take it with us than take a drink at the water fountain and come back 20 minutes later when you're thirsty again. So it's really some great more options for everybody that we didn't have maybe in the old days. Fitness and exercise. They say sitting is the old smoking, right? If you sit too long, you're going to basically not be healthy. And so a lot of people now have sit and stand desk or some type of access to those, or even just get up and walk around every hour for 5 minutes. Just something so you're not sitting for 8 hours at a desk. I used to always do that, and my neck would kill me afterwards. Just sitting over a computer. So different stuff like that. Encouraging people to use the stairs. A lot of times the stairwells are just these old, dirty, dark, concrete, stairs that nobody wants to walk in because they're afraid of getting mugged. Can we make a glorious stair that even if it's a fire stair, can we add light? Can we add windows? Can we add color so that people can do that instead of always using the elevator? Just another means of exercise or just walking around. And then a lot of corporate campuses and other buildings these days are trying to include some type of fitness center in them. Hotels as well, right? So even if it's one treadmill and one thing of weights, it's still better than nothing, that someone can jump in there in the morning or the afternoon or night. Some people are providing showers. So if you bike to work or bike to school, you can, wash up and get ready for the day. So just those options for everybody is great to have. And that, again, provides the better well-being for all of us. On the comfort level, everybody has a different comfort level. You could have 20 people in a conference room or in a classroom, and someone could say they're hot, someone could be cold, someone could be just right. And so is there ways, and again, in a conference rooms, it's hard to do that in a classroom, but in offices, in some type of other individual spaces, can you have control over your thermostat? So if you're hot in your little section and someone's cold, they can change it. Maybe one side is close to a window that's got a lot of heat coming in and you want the AC. Another spot is maybe in the inside of the building, it has no heat. And so you want it, the other way around. Ventilation and filtration. Again, with COVID, there were so many things about, are we changing our filters? Are we ventilating the building enough to get air going to get all the germs and concerns out of the building? And then the last thing is acoustics, right? When we used to have these old offices with solid office walls, everybody had their room and you could just be quiet like I'm in right now. The open offices, they're so noisy, right? I know that it's nice to have the daylight and views and seeing your coworkers, but I struggle being on conference calls with all my coworkers around me talking. And so you have to have a mix of big rooms, small rooms, medium-sized rooms, telephone booths, small conference rooms, whatever it is, to give people options for helping with sound and noise, because it's very distracting when you're trying to do work or school or relax or whatever with all the noise these days. Or use acoustical materials like ceiling tiles, like carpet. We always want this cool modern look of concrete floors and no ceiling tiles. And it looks awesome in pictures, but it's the worst noise in the world, right? And it just doesn't work. Trust me, I've been there and I've worked in firms that had it and I hated it. The last thing, and this is a newer thing that came with LEED version 4, and again, you may or may not be familiar with this, but there's two terminologies out there. One is EPDs, Environmental Product Declarations, and the other one's Health Product Declarations. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but what it is much like the material ingredients, like a cereal box where you're trying to see what's inside the cereal or what's inside the can of soup, we're trying to see what's inside our materials and our products nowadays. And the reason why is we're afraid that there's things in there that are chemicals of concern, things that cause cancer, things that cause asthma, things that cause other health issues. And it's in normal day products that we use. It's kind of like asbestos was. Back in the day, everybody thought it was fine. And everybody said, oh, wow, it's not fine. Well, are there other products out there that maybe we just don't know yet that could be bad? So what the sustainability and well-being side is asking for architects, interior designers, and others to start looking at them. I'm not going to go into all the details today about it, but if you're very curious, I would definitely recommend looking at it. The environmental product declaration side is more about where the product, the life cycle of the product. Let's say, again, brick. It was extracted from a certain place. It was taken to a plant. It was manufactured. And then it's shipped to a place, and then it's used. And so it's looking at that whole cycle of the project from cradle to cradle, cradle to gate, you'll hear those terminologies, but those are all coming into play. There's this whole thing called embodied carbon. There's like a life cycle assessment, everything that wants to be involved in the construction of your building or of your space, where all those products came from and how they were sustainability of the manufacturing of them. The HPD is the Health Product Declaration, which again is looking specifically more at the chemicals within the product. Again, this whole thought is the last thing you want to do is put some type of material in a hospital that causes cancer, and it's in the wing of the cancer patients, it's kind of scary thought. And so again, we're not all chemists. We don't understand all the chemical attributes of products, but if there's more transparency, the more we can better understand and better educate our clients on. So again, a lot of stuff going on the material side that's such a huge impact on the well-being. Hope that all makes sense, or at least keep the basic idea of that. Okay, and then this is that Buddy Holly project all completed. They said this back thing is kind of like the bird feathers that are kind of flopping up and down. It's kind of cool. If you can see the structure piece here with the two flat feathers sticking up. I thought it was kind of neat. Okay, so when it comes to projects in the design side, I always argue that the most important thing is having a kickoff meeting with everybody at the table. It costs a little bit more money to bring everybody together, but the best way to have everybody understand what is the goal of this project, what are the expectations, how we're going to do it, and how we're going to get there, it's so important. So again, back in the day when I was working on this UNT football stadium project, we had 30 people get together for a whole day to look at LEED. We had the owner, we had the architects, we had the engineers, we had the contractor, we had students, facilities, users, all that. And we basically said, we're going for LEED on this project. At the time we had to get LEED Gold. We ended up with LEED Platinum. But again, it was this whole thing where we all had to work together to understand what's the design, what's the engineering, what's the cost of all of this from the contractor side, and how is the owner going to operate it afterwards. If you don't start on day one on that and you try to do it at the end, it's just going to cost more money because you're playing catch up. If you don't have everybody there, there's someone that's going to ask a question later on, well, why wasn't I there? What did I miss? And it's too late. So again, it doesn't always work for every project, but if possible, the more people you can have in that first day for the first meeting, the better the project will be. I don't know if y'all are familiar with specifications, but basically when you do a project, you have drawings that most people think about with drawing a building, but there's also 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper called specifications. This is all the information that maybe is not in the drawings, where you might call out a ceiling tile, but they don't understand what's a ceiling tile made of, what's the size, what kind of grid do you use, all that stuff is in the specifications. What's important when you talk about sustainability is having stuff in there for the contractor to understand. We've designed this beautiful sustainable project, but if the contractor doesn't build it that way, or the subcontractors don't, then you've lost everything you've designed. So there are specifications that you can put in your project that talk about recycling construction waste, talk about indoor air quality, talk about using sustainable materials, and then this thing about commissioning, which is again like a test and balance or commissioning systems to make sure they all work afterwards. All these things that may not show up in your drawings, but they're still important for the contractor to do. So again, it's just something that a lot of sustainable projects have to have to make sure they get done right. And then the last thing is you design this beautiful sustainable project. The contractor actually does build it correctly, but then the client comes in and destroys it all, right? It's like buying a sports car and then never taking it in for oil change, right? And 3 years later, the car doesn't work. Why do all that? Why spend all that money and all that time and not work? Some clients are very sustainable minded and very smart and understand how to run buildings. Some clients have no idea. You get a facility guy that's been doing it for 20 years the old-fashioned way, and he has no idea how to use the new control system or turning off the lights. So again, there's post-occupancy policies you can share with the client. How do we, recycle things in the office or in the classroom? How do you purchase sustainable materials? How do you clean them? What do you do for pest control? All those things are important to follow up at the project at the end. You can also do a post-occupancy evaluation, POE, or some type of follow-up. Again, go a year later and say, hey, how's my building running? Is it efficient as we thought it was going to be? Are you saving energy? Are you saving water? Those are things you can follow up with. Proper training and education to the maintenance staff is always good. And again, the periodic checkups. A lot of us sometimes say the project's done, I'm walking away and never go back, and you never learn from it. You never know for the next one, hey, I was right or I was wrong, and how can I improve in the future? Okay, any questions so far? All pretty straightforward. Okay. Yeah.
No question. Yeah.
No questions? Okay.
Chris, so on these different rating systems, how do you feel that they either help or hinder us in designing sustainably? If, lead and, they kind of start the conversation, and then
Right.
sometimes it feels like you get so focused on the points and what you're going to hit, and
Yep.
it's maybe not going to lead to the best product, even if it's one that's technically gold or whatever. So how do you reconcile with wanting to hit some of those from the client's perspective versus how to actually design it
Yep.
sustainably?
Yeah, no, great question. Again, in the old days, you would ask a client, hey, you want to do sustainability in your project? And they're like, I don't want to pay for lead. I'm like, well, there's more than just lead. And I want to touch on that just now. Your perfect question leading me up to this. I think every project needs to be sustainable in one way or other. It doesn't have to be lead platinum. It doesn't have to, you don't want to chase points. You don't want to spend money for useless things. You don't have to do everything. It's nice to pick one thing and say, I did something important to this project and it was sustainable because of this. And it doesn't have to be everything. And again, it shouldn't just be about lead. It shouldn't be about chasing points. It needs to be about what's important to that client and what's important to that project, and what makes sense. Does that kind of make that answer? I agree. It's definitely, a lot of people get caught up in a scorecard in the old days, especially. We always be like, okay, we got to buy 2 more points. Where can we buy those? And you don't want to do that, The UNT one, again, they wanted gold. We got gold, and then we did the wind turbines, which pushed us into platinum. We weren't going for platinum. We just got lucky. But the nice thing was the wind turbines were free. They got a grant. So they didn't spend the money to get to platinum, even though we did. So there's some of those things that come sometimes shake out. They just, it's perfect timing or lucky that some of those things happen. But again, I don't think it should be a focus on that. I'm going to show you a couple other options that if you don't want to do lead, here's some things to consider. Just in a couple minutes. Sound good? So let me know after the next section if it doesn't answer your question more. Okay, so a couple years ago, they had to say the thing, hey, we need to have green codes. And so a variety of different groups include the International Code Council, AIA, USGBC, ASHRAE, ASTM, and all that got together and made some green codes. As I mentioned before, there's laws and codes out there that you have to do. When it comes to green rating systems, sometimes you can pick and choose what you have to do to get the points. You don't have to do everything. So it is different between codes and rating systems. The International Green Construction Code came out in 2012. And again, there was just this idea about we need to look at more sustainability in our projects versus just our typical building codes. So that was the thought behind it. And I'm not going to get into all the details of it. There's also another piece to this. One's the building code. The other one's the energy code. So IECC is typically what we see a lot of projects are using the IECC more than the green codes. I think San Antonio has maybe IECC 2018 or 2021 or something like that. And that's important. But this is, again, IECC looks specifically at the energy side where the other stuff looks at everything else. In Dallas, they adopted a green building code. Again, that was green for buildings. And then there's also an energy code as well. So I'm just pointing to all this, there's 2 codes in some ways. One's building, one's specific to energy. And again, there's 2 ways to look at energy. There's prescriptive and there's performance. This prescriptive path is like baking a cake. You have all these recipes listed out, and you have to follow exactly to the letter on which ingredients you're using to make your cake. I'm looking at the envelope. I'm looking at the different mechanical systems and hot water, lighting, and all that. And I get to a cake, and it turns out great. The performance path is not using ingredients at all and just trying your best to make the cake still work out in the end. So maybe, again, you might be using less envelope and more energy or better lighting and worse, you kind of offset each other ones, and you have to use an energy model to show that you're still meeting code. So again, there's two different ways to meet codes. The prescriptive path is usually what we see in a building code, where there's just certain things you have to meet. The performance path is what we see like in LEED and everything, where you're doing an energy model, and again, you're almost trying to figure out a way to get there without following everything exactly. So hopefully that makes sense, but there's just kind of two ways to look at that. Again, I mentioned the city of Dallas, where again I do a lot of my stuff. There's energy code for that as well. And then there's the green building code. I'm not going to get into the weeds of all this stuff as much, but if you work in Dallas, you have to know this in case you're doing a project there. So on top of all that, then we talk about these grading rating systems. And like we say, again, if you don't want to do LEED, well, what else is out there? Well, you can see there's a lot of stuff out there. And this is not even half of it. The top row that I have here is more of the building rating systems, including LEED, Well, Fitwell, and Living Building Challenge. All the other stuff below is various things. Again, you can see there's Energy Star in here. People are familiar with that. There's Water Sense, which is more water. There's different things for wood. There's different things for furniture. These sometimes are maybe product specific or a different program that's not, again, to the whole building. So when I say to a client, you want to do sustainability, I show them this and say, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, wow, I don't know. You have to pick just one. You can pick whatever you want. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about with clients, and sometimes it's overwhelming. And even for me, it's hard to keep up with it all. So I definitely just encourage you when you're starting a project is to look at all the options. I'm gonna dive in a couple of these a little bit more. This idea about rating systems came with this, this notion that we need to look at new construction, we need to look at interior designs, because sometimes you don't affect the whole building. And obviously there's a lot of existing buildings out there.
Chris. Hello? Oh. You pressed.
So just again, this idea about addressing different building types, looking at design and construction and operations. And again, a lot of these rating systems have some type of checklist or scorecard where hopefully this works. So we talked about LEED a little bit. I won't dive too much in there if you're familiar with it, but again, LEED was one of the first well-known or the better known ones that came out. It's actually USGBC has been around for 30 years now. And oops. And again, when I was talking about some of the material changes, that was a big thing in LEED version 4. Now, LEED version 4 has been out for a while, and actually LEED version 5 has been officially released. So if you're interested in LEED, there's a version 5 for existing buildings that just came out now. And then LEED for version 5 for new construction will come out in the new year. So again, if you have clients or people interested in the new version, just definitely look into that. This was again that UNT project we did. This is a football stadium. This was again back in the day. And again, you can see the wind turbines are over in the corner of the site, but it was a perfect project that came together nicely for getting LEED Platinum. Living Building Challenge came about with this idea about some people saying, well, what happens after LEED Platinum? Can we do more than just LEED Platinum? And rightfully so. Again, LEED is great, but it's not the end all. There is other programs out there that look at things that LEED doesn't. And so again, I definitely encourage, clients and others to look at various options. Living Building Challenge, again, is a challenge. It's a little bit tougher than LEED, and it's looking at things that go beyond LEED. There's only one Living Building Challenge project in the whole state of Texas that I know of, and that's Josie Ranch Pavilion. I think I have a picture for that. I'll show you. It's up in Decatur, Texas, which is up closer to me. Some of the things that Living Building Challenge does that LEED doesn't is that it looks at 1 year post-occupancy. So in LEED, when you submit for your certification, you're saying, I hope that I can reduce my energy by 50%. And that's all they're basically going to let you show is that you're hoping to. With Living Building Challenge and other programs, they say come back 1 year later and make sure you're showing that you're meeting that versus just that you think you can. So obviously a little bit more tougher to follow up with a year later. It also requires net zero energy and net zero water use. And then the red list of chemicals to avoid is, again, looking at those chemicals of concern and using certain products and material that don't have those at all. So definitely a lot harder. But again, much like LEED and other programs, you can use it as a guide tool, but maybe not submit for the certification. Just say, hey, I love this idea of using all my water on site. How does that work? They also did certain things where they started saying, let's do petal certification, where instead of getting all 7 petals together for one final certification, I'm going to go through for 3 or 4 petals that work for my project, but I can't get all 7. It's not really a cop-out. It's just like, hey, my project just doesn't allow that opportunity to do everything. So again, look at those options as well. But again, it's a great program. And then here's the Josie Ranch Pavilion. It was done by Lake Plato. It's a kind of an education building, about 5,000 square feet out in nowhere. It's got solar panels on the roof. It's got a water cistern, but it's a beautiful project. Obviously, it's not really a typical project where, you know, everybody's using it every day, but it's a nice, pretty project out there. If you're ever in that area, you can go check it out. I think anybody can go see it. It's pretty fun, or look up and learn more about it. So the first two were more, again, looking at everything holistically. Well and Fitwell came out with this idea about the people side of things versus just the planet, right? And again, Well started saying, hey, LEED is for planet and Well is for people. I would say it's not completely correct, but there was this thought with the well-being side, like I'm saying, that I saw addition to the past couple of years. Now there's programs out there for it. It's similar to LEED. It's the same GBCI group that runs both, and Rick Fedrizzi that left USGBC went to Well. So there's a lot of connections together. And there's even a program that says you can get both certifications together, and there's synergies between the two. But it looks at air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. So again, some things like water and energy is like LEED, and some things are brand new like movement and nourishment. And they also, on this one, some of these programs start requiring a recertification. So every couple of years, you have to go back and make sure you're still doing it. At the time, LEED for new construction said it's one and done. Now, LEED for existing building has a recertification like Well. And then similar, they have levels of certification like silver, platinum, gold, that kind of stuff. The thing that Well sells us on, and I love this slide, I use it all the time, is that when you look at the cost, every client says, what's it going to cost me to do sustainability or Well? The cost to do the design and construction and the maintenance of a building, let's say you have a corporate headquarters for Google or Apple, and 30 years, the people working in that building, the cost for the people is more important than the building itself. And that means, again, are they happy? Are they sick? Are they productive? You're looking at the cost to manage and operate those people with salaries and benefits than you are of the building. So again, over 30 years, it's a lot more important that the people are healthy and happy than the building itself. So it's a selling point to try to convince clients, you're going to cost a little bit more money at the front part to do the building, but in the end, the payback is, again, 30 years of people happy. Obviously, there's ups and downs for that theory, but that's just the thought. And I like it. Again, it's trying to sell the reason for doing sustainability is the people. When I was at Gensler, we did a project in downtown Dallas called Dallas County Records Building. If you're familiar, this is where JFK got shot right here on the drive. This is Dealey Plaza. And then our building is the backdrop for it. It's an old building. It's actually 3 buildings. One was a jail and a records building and an annex. They're all old buildings from different, like 1950s or 40s it was built. And the client wanted to which was Dallas County, wanted to basically upgrade the whole building inside. But you can't change the exterior because it's still used for movies and TV shows about JFK. So basically, they went in and renovated a 300,000 square foot, 3 buildings into one single building. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. If you want to know more about it, I'll let you know. But the client, because it's a county building, had to do LEED. They said, we have to do LEED Silver because it's public. But they were interested in the Well because they were trying to bring back public employees to work there. And they have to compete with all the corporate companies that hire everybody for higher salaries and better environments. So they said, we want to use this to basically as a selling point for people to come back. Again, three old buildings, cleaned up nicely. It's more environmental that people want to work in. So they did 2 certifications at the same time. It's one of the few projects that I know of that's done that. So it's a good story to tell. And again, if you want to know more, I can share more with you about it. And then the last one was Fitwell. The well building program is very expensive, unfortunately. A lot of clients were turned off by that when it first came out. Fitwell is kind of a cheaper version, right? Fitwell came together by GSA, which is a General Services Administration through the government, and CDC, which we all know about through, again, COVID and all that. But it was more of a government-friendly program that was a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier. And again, some people said, hey, let's do this one. It's similar. The only thing is different. It's stars versus gold and platinum. So some people are like, what's 3 stars mean? Well, 3 stars is probably similar to a LEED Platinum project. It's similar to LEED, where there's certain programs, again, like looking at indoor environment and water and all that. But there's a lot of things in here that I like, right? Looking at cafeteria and foods, looking at vending machines and snack bars, looking at outdoor spaces, and looking at different workspaces that I've been talking about. So again, it's just another option for a client that says, I can't afford LEED, I can't afford well. I bet you probably can afford this. I mean, it's probably like 1/10 the cost. So again, some clients are like, hey, let's do this. If you're familiar with Perkins and Will, they're, again, a big design firm around. They have an office in Dallas they moved into. And it's my understanding, I think they did LEED, Well, and Fitwell all together. They did 3 certifications for their office. Again, if you want to know more about that, check it out. But again, just another program that's about health and well-being. And then here's a whole bunch of other ones too. Again, I mentioned Energy Star. Everybody thinks of Energy Star like washers and dishwashers and all that, but there is also Energy Star for buildings, which looks at energy use. There's STARS, which I think is used for higher education universities. There's CHIPS that's usually used for K through 12. There's BREEAM that came across from Europe and is in the US. There's Green Globes that came from the North. And then sustainable sites. There's a couple projects here in Texas that sustainable sites. So again, and sustainable sites mean that there's no building involved. It's just a civil landscape, outdoor plaza or space. There's 3 here up in DFW that I can share with you in the future if you want to. But so again, when a client, again, going back to Derek's question, when your client says, hey, what can I do? There's a whole lot of options, And then I'm gonna give you one more. This is, so again, that was all the sustainability stuff. As an architect for the AIA, American Institute of Architects, there's also this idea of the 2030 challenge. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but there's a guy named Ed Masria that I was lucky enough to get a picture with back in the day, who came up with this challenge. Says, I want all buildings to be net zero by the year 2030. What's scary, that's 7 years from now. And I don't think we're going to get there. But this idea was, again, about reducing our fossil fuel use and trying to basically reduce our energy use. And so out of that became I didn't have it. There's the AIA 2030 commitment. Here it is right here. So again, all the architecture firms, or most of them around the world, are trying to basically track their energy use, submit it to a website, and collectively they're trying to show how we can all reduce energy. And each year they send out reports. And I think, again, we're at 50% reduction maybe on our projects, but obviously it's nowhere near zero. So the good news is we're all reducing energy, but the bad news is we're nowhere there. So again, if you work for an architecture firm or interested in the future, this is something that's important. What came of this was what's called the Framework for Design Excellence. You also might have heard of this terminology, the top 10 COAT awards. Lake Flato and other firms win those often each year. But it's this idea of looking at 10 measures. Again, these measures are similar to LEED and other programs like water, like energy, like materials. The good thing is it's not a scorecard. It's not a rating system. It's not something that you have to do. It's just good design. So this is what I try. Again, the client says, I don't want to pay for LEED or I don't want to chase points. Okay, let's just use these 10 measures and look at these as resources. And how can I design my project around these? And you're not chasing points, and you're basically still getting a nice sustainable design. So I think that's, Derek, again, if a client says, hey, I don't want to do LEED or I don't want to chase points, I recommend this to clients. Let's look at this and see if this makes sense. Hey, your project is, again, working with the community. Oh, great. And you're looking at landscaping. Okay, there we go. And it's trying to save energy. These are not difficult things. And if you go to the AIA website, they give you resources, they give you case studies, they give you examples. It's a lot of stuff, but this is what I'm trying, and a lot of firms are trying to promote instead of lead. Does that kind of help? Make sense to you all? It's just architectural, good design, sustainable design. And then the last thing, the AIA also has a material pledge where, again, they're looking at the healthy material on the well-being side. So good, health, human health, social health, equity, ecosystem health, climate health, and circular economy. These are all things that, again, as architects, we're trying to do more or do better with than we've done in the past. So again, materials, there's also mindful materials and other groups out there that really look at that. There is cost associated with sustainability. Again, there's no way around it. Some things just cost more. Solar panels cost money. Wind turbines cost money, again. But the key thing, again, you don't have to dive into all this, is does it make sense? If you use something that reduces your energy use, then you're spending less money in operation use. If you're doing something that is better, healthier for your employees, then that's going to save you money in the long run. So it's just important to, when we did the football stadium for UNT, we looked at every single cost, and the client came up with the total cost for it was to do a LEED Platinum football stadium. And it was more, again, but in the end, they thought it was justified. So every client's different, every person's different. But again, at some point, you have to look at costs and what's the impact one way or the other. Here's just some resources out there. Again, there's so much out there to learn. But again, if you're interested in the 2030 challenge, definitely look at that. It's a great website that gives strategies on what to do to save energy. Again, I mentioned the AI Design Excellence as architects. It's a great tool to use for good sustainable design. Building Green is a great program out there with stories and information about materials and all of that, if you're interested. And then Mindful Materials is, again, this idea about sustainable materials, healthy materials. So again, great resources if you're looking at projects or even for your class. And then obviously, again, in addition to the AIA, I'm also very much involved with the USGBC Texas chapter. I've been involved in that for 15 years. And again, we hope that we're a resource as well. So if you want to know more about LEED and well-being and all that, we put on events as well throughout the year in various chapters. I think there's a San Antonio chapter or branch. So again, it's another resource. So just to draw quick conclusions, again, I think there's so many times in the past where we always said, let's just do this one thing, and this is what we typically do, and we don't think any other options. And it's important to reevaluate all that. Again, it's important to look at our spaces and our places, right? We want to look at healthier options when it comes to food and exercise and indoor air quality. We don't always have to follow the normal, right? We know that, again, our phones are changing every year, right? Does anybody still use a rotary phone, right? We know technology gets better, so why don't we do the same thing for our products and our buildings, right? Select the appropriate strategies that make sense. Don't just spend $100 million on solar panels if it doesn't make sense, right? Spend $1 million on solar panels and send something else. Work with the clients, work with the contractors, and figure out what's the cost and what's it going to be to put on your project. And then again, put the emphasis on our health. And if we're not healthy, then why are we here, right? We're all going to be miserable. And you're seeing that with heat waves and, again, COVID and other issues where, again, a lot of us are struggling with all these disasters, natural disasters. And so, again, the more we can do in our built environment, hopefully the better we can help against our things we can't control. And then again, here's my contact info. If you think of something afterwards, I'm happy to take questions now, but if you think of anything else, I'm always happy to share. Again, I enjoy presenting to students, and I enjoy, talking about it and just sharing my thoughts. Hopefully that was not too much today or not too much over everybody's heads. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chris. It was really amazing. I learned a lot. Okay. Yeah. Questions? No, Derek, you have questions?
I think hopefully I answered.
And yes, no notification yet.